In light of our goal of reading John's gospel like a koan, certain bits of his words stick out. Of course, once I was off to the races, I was paying attention to the question words and to the ways that what's written function to give rest to mental overwork. So when the text says, "The Word became flesh and dwelt among us," of course I asked, whose flesh? And the answer was my own. I'm not a realized being in any sense, and I don't answer this way to be blasphemous. It's just that from where I'm sitting, Christ can only work with me on a bodily level if the flesh he assumed is my own. The only here and now that matters in a personal transformation kind of way is the here and now in which I come to myself this very moment. We should pay attention to unknowing. The gospel says he was in the world, and the world came into being through him, yet the world did not know him. John would later say, "Among you stands one whom you do not know." Of course, our minds want to ask, what does that mean? And that is an exquisite view of our predicament. Christ resists mental evaluation. If we're really honest with ourselves, everything in existence resists evaluation. We can judge, but we really can't say anything definitive about, well, anything at all, unless our egos are sitting so quietly that we can hear other people exactly as they are, and the world exactly as it is. Let's talk about John's characterization of Jesus as the Lamb of God. It only takes 5 minutes of listening during overpriced college studies to know that Jesus was the substitution sacrifice whose suffering would compensate for the breach of God's covenant without everyone dying, as was required. For a moment, please ask your discomfort about covenants sealed in blood to sit quiet. That's how the ancients did covenants. It's part of why Christ's sacrifice is immensely important. What's interesting to me about the Lamb of God is John never says, "That is the Lamb of God." He never says, "I myself have seen and have testified that that is the Son of God." He always says, "This." He always says this. And when you're sitting alone, when the house is quiet and you're reading the gospel, when it causes you to ask, who is the Lamb of God? Look down at your own hands. You, exactly as you are. And if you're like me, you're a hot, hot mess. You are the only candidate for who the Lamb of God can be. I know that seems like we're overplaying with words, endowing translation choices with significance they may not inherently have, but whatever helps us transform is worth doing, even if the scholars at overpriced theological college tell us we're in the wrong. Christ wasn't afraid to be in the wrong. Neither should we be afraid. It only remains for you to bring the "how can that be" question from the recesses of unknowing to your conscious awareness. That's going to take precisely the kind of intuitive, emotionally awake, rooted and embodied knowing that's the fruit of turning off the mind and letting the body lead. And ultimately, we become kinder to ourselves. Because if we ask, what part of the human experience becomes the Christ within? Who is the one who bears the burdens we can't? The answer flips our thinking on its head. This time, it's not our lower selves that panic and try to grasp at everything by understanding it, but our higher selves, whose self-protective skills allow us to lay down our need for control. It's true. This very ego is the Christ. Let us also go and die with him,